Hello again. Welcome back to Asgard, and welcome back to Stacia. So since the last episode, I have been doing a massive amount of prep. Also did do a little bit of building around the base, but due to an internet outage that I had, as well as one that Severe had for that matter, I didn't get quite as much building done as I'd hoped because prep actually took a lot of time. But I did get a little bit of stuff done, and I went ahead and I actually set up a sequential fabricator. And this sequential fabricator is set to craft asphalt, which I've actually ran out all of it at the moment. But it's getting lava from a lava line, and if we pop down, which it will get moved in due time, but if we pop down, lava's being created here through a mechanical squeezer with blaze powder. In this area, I did get this all set back up, and this is all just set up through XNet. Pretty identical to the way that we had it, except now we have XNet controlling it all, and we have a little bit of redstone control here to tell it when to shut off the blaze powder and coal creation. So I've got it set to an item sensor that just looks and says, if there's more than 500 in there, go ahead and shut it off. And it just basically powers redstone into the hopper. Also have a little spot here that stockpiles some blaze powder and gunpowder. Even though we have it over here, this is with void upgrades, and I didn't want to void, because if this was voiding, it would just be infinitely voiding and wasting our blaze rod. So I've got that in place with no void upgrade, and beyond that, it's all pretty much identical to the way that we had it before. So as you can see here, and all this works kind of the same way as before, basically just with more filtering and XNet to control everything. And then blaze powder goes in here and makes lava, which then goes into the ender tank. So and then in addition, I have been working a little bit down here, a little bit. I was actually wanting to get more of this built out, because we're going to be doing some stuff down here before too long, in a few episodes. And I was wanting to get the first turbine finished out, but I didn't quite have time for that. Also, oh yeah, I forgot, I pulled this up to use it for something and forgot to replace it. I did go ahead and I set up like cross here. I did set this up, this other mechanical crafter, because we're going to be using that today to make turbines. And then I started bringing this up a little bit and figuring out how I'm going to start basically winding everything together for the top of this this main structure. I also made some more solar panels and some little things like that. But and the ore processing system has proved extremely beneficial to us, because for the prep today was very, very expensive. I did lay it out in here just so I didn't overlook anything when it came time to craft that. But this was extremely time intensive, extremely material intensive. I ordered, for example, if we take a look at my backpack, you can see all this stuff. So there's 4 stacks of osmium blocks, a bunch of energized steel, redstone flex coils, which these are electrum gears. So 6 stacks basically of electrum gears, 24 stacks of infused alloy, more than that realistically, a bunch of redstone wire coil. I mean, it was just a massive, massive prep undertaking, to say the least. But let me go ahead and grab all this stuff for starters. And it's nighttime, which works out for us. Let me pop over, and we're going to craft out, should be our last batch of steel casings for this. It's going to be a little bit more than what we need, but we're going to go ahead and make a stack of steel casings. Go, gadget. Steel casings. There we go. There's 64. And then let's go ahead, pop on back. And these, I'm going to set these off to the side for right now. Now, the next thing, if we take a look at my backpack, I did prep this up. You saw this probably last episode. And this is just a few things that we're going to be using today. Let's go ahead and grab these. We're going to start off by setting up our fuel system. And let me go ahead and get ender sail to get more obsidian. I need to get that automated before long, but it's just so easy to vein mine it. And if we pop out here, I've set up this, which it's just a base platform at the moment. We're going to build a little bit to the top and a little bit to the bottom. Just like we're going to be going through and adding some detail here once we get our actual fully fledged AE2 cables running, because right now there's not a whole lot of point in doing that just yet, I don't think. But what we're going to be doing is, if we take a look at, well, actually we'll just pull up Fission Fuel. And this is a little bit of a process to craft. We're going to be setting that up first thing because Fission Fuel is what we're going to need to make nuclear waste. Because in order to make our ME controller, it's a little bit of a process, and it actually kind of takes us into sort of the, not really end game, but the late game mechanism stuff, which is getting into fission reactors, and we'll be setting up a turbine and all that. Beyond that, most of the stuff is pretty straightforward, but we need to get polonium, and it's a little bit of a process to do that, and it's also a dangerous process. So we're going to be covering this on camera, making sure that we cover every bit of it, because if it is set up incorrectly, things can explode. Now, I've set this little platform up to basically give us a full chunk here, and then this is just kind of a little side chunk. We'll make use of it for something, but the most important thing is this area right here. And we're going to make sure that all of our setups for this are kind of in the same chunk, just to avoid any kind of chunk loading issues and stuff, because like I said, if things go bad, the fission reactor will explode in a pretty nasty explosion. But let's go ahead and pull up our Fission Fuel. And to get this, it's going to be Uranium Hexafluoride in an isotopic centrifuge to make the Fission Fuel. So we're going to go ahead and just set up the isotopic centrifuge. Do we want to start with that, or do we want to start? Let's start from the left, actually. So the very first thing, chemical dissolution chamber with fluorite will give us hydrofluoric acid. And so we want to go ahead and do that. This is an intertank with our sulfuric acid line. And we're going to set this up. Oh, and you know what? Sorry, I'm going to need a rotary condenser real quick, because we're going to be taking the liquid form and just turning it back into gas form, because at least at the moment it's easier for us to transfer that than it is to transfer the gas version. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it feed first into a rotary condenser, and we're going to say that fluids, you input, you output, and let's go ahead and toggle operation. That's going to get sulfuric acid, and it's going to start making this sulfuric acid, which is the gas version. And then we're going to set up the chemical dissolution chamber, and let's go ahead, our gas line, we're going to say you output on this side. And there we go. It's going to start getting that gas version of sulfuric acid over here in the chemical dissolution. Now, right now, we're not going to have this plugged up to any kind of automation, but we're going to plug it up with some AE2. For now, we can just use like a chest or something and just have it be fed fluorite. But let's grab a bit of this, because this is something that's going to need to run pretty consistently for us. And let's go ahead also and run that cable over, providing this with some power. And we'll just run a logistical transporter there and say, yeah, items are coming in through the top. And we'll go ahead and set that to extract. So that's going to start taking that and making hydrofluoric acid. You can see it makes quite a bit. It doesn't use a ton of sulfuric acid, so it goes pretty far. And that gives us one part of our uranium hexafluoride. Now the other part is the uranium oxide, which is yellow cake uranium through a chemical oxidizer, and that's just uranium through an enrichment chamber. Gets us 2 of those. So let's go ahead and right opposite this, we're going to set up another little system here. Let's do the enriching factory there, and then it's the chemical oxidizer. And let's go ahead and just cut away that and right there as well. And that way we can run our power cables just under the floor here. And let's grab ourselves another chest and another, we'll just use the ultimate logistical transporters. It's really faster than what we need at the moment, but we can do it, so we might as well. And then let's pop over, let's grab ourselves a bit of uranium just to get this system started with. Now we'll have to speed this up with some speed upgrades. I kind of want to be a little bit cautious about that just to make sure that we've got the power to support it. I noticed whenever I got online, after we updated to the most recent version, which is 1.11.6, the game mode, the game rule for day and night cycle had been toggled. We skipped the version prior, but day-night cycle was still locked, so I had to, since I have admin control, I had to turn it back on, and I was completely out of power. Without my solar panels, I had no power. So I did expand, added a few more solar panels over there, and had to wait for my system to build up, which was a little bit of a headache because it can't build up with everything plugged up without the diesel generators being able to run. They actually produce a lot of our power. So it was a little bit of a headache to get that jump started. So I'm a little bit cautious about my my power at the moment. Let's go ahead and say left side is going to be output. Auto eject is on. And then over here we're going to say you input from that side. So it's going to start getting that yellow cake uranium. And it is going to start making uranium oxide. Now you notice it doesn't make a ton of it. But for every uranium ingot, we do get 500 millibuckets, which isn't too bad. Especially since we have excavators that specifically are mining uranium, or can mine uranium. They're turned off at the moment. I want to see if this has finished running, because I had moved it a couple times. This is like its 4th cycle, and it is done. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. But I have been mining out like big areas, like all the ores in each area. Okay, so now we have the 2 fluids that we need. And these are going to go, at this point, straight into a chemical infuser to make our uranium hexafluoride. So we'll go ahead and set up our chemical infuser. Let me get, over here I made some ultimate pressurized tubes. Let's go ahead and grab these. Let's actually go here. Okay, so that's going to get the hydrofluoric acid that it needs. I gotta try to avoid crashing here. And we're going to attach our ultimate pressurized tube. Let's actually go below the ground because I can hide this fairly easily. So let's just go like that. Get that plugged up, and that way we should have uranium oxide in here. I know I wasted a little bit by breaking some pipes after I'd placed them. And we'll go ahead and run some power over. And now this is going to start making us that uranium hexafluoride. Which this now needs to go into the isotopic centrifuge. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up this, and let's go ahead and bring this up also. So right there. And then we're going to do our ultimate pressurized tubes coming in the bottom there. And then right next to this can all be hidden away. Kind of. Sort of hidden away. Let's run this down just to make sure that we've got some power in this, because it is going to require some power. And then right here, let's say that gases eject, it outputs out the back. Let's do that. And that way we can have the pipe come out the back here. Okay, so that's plugged up, and it's going into the isotopic centrifuge, and it's making that fission fuel, which is what we're going to need for our fission reactor. Let's put this in and just put that on there. That way it can start extracting that fuel. I am going to have to make some more ultimate cables, but that's fine. Let's make sure, yep, output on the front. That's great. Yeah, you can see there's no fission fuel in there. Okay, so that is the first step of basically 3 steps. Three steps plus cleanup steps, making the fuel, which is probably the easiest part. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually make our fission reactor. And to do this, we're going to need a number of things. First and foremost, we are going to need some fission reactor casings. So I've laid out here 34. Let's go ahead and grab these. And this is a little bit more than what we need as far as the straight casings. We have made these before, of course, to make the energy acceptor, but only needing 4. A little bit more expensive when you need a bunch, but luckily slates We basically have them automated, just not the actual input. Automated fluix crystals, automated steel casings, still kind of a pain, but not too bad. And Enderium gears automated. Now the next thing we're going to want is 4 reactor glass. Let's go ahead and grab that. We are also going to want these right here, these fission reactor ports. We're going to want 4 of these. So there's 4 fission reactor ports. We are also going to want the 2 different assemblies. We're going to want the fission fuel assembly and the control rod assembly. So these are actually pretty cheap. Let's go ahead. There's our fission fuel assembly and our control rod assembly. And we're going to be making the smallest possible fission reactor to start with, just to keep our costs down, because these things are very expensive as is. So I want to kind of keep that cost down as best I can. And then we're going to want a fission reactor logic adapter. This allows us to kind of control our fission reactor with redstone. And then we're also going to want to go ahead and get ourselves some radioactive waste barrels. We're going to go ahead and be getting 3 of these, just to basically increase the amount of storage that we have. Because when it comes to nuclear waste, you cannot store them in a normal tank. They are a gas, but you can't store them in like a gas tank. You cannot transport them via quantum entangler-porters. You can't do a lot of things when it comes to nuclear waste. You pretty much, the only storage that you have is radioactive waste barrels, since they are nuclear material. So what we're going to do, oh yeah, I need to make more ultimate pressurized tubes. Give me just a moment on that. I did speed up some of our mechanism stuff between episodes, so at least it is a little bit faster now. I've actually got enough though. And you'll notice this recipe here, I had to pull this one out to make room for redstone alloy, so that's why that's just hanging out, because I don't have the means to plug that back up just yet. So okay, so we're just going to bring this down. Let's just get it under the ground for now. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up our fission reactor. And we're going to have this setting just right in here, I think. We will expand this and make it larger over time. But for right now, right in here is going to be good. We're going to make it a 3x3 in size, and then we're going to make it 4 tall. So like that. And this is the minimum size that you can make one of these. So we'll go ahead and just bring down the corners. Yeah, like that. And let's pull out this bottom piece, because we're going to be running some redstone. So the fission reactor logic adapter, we're just going to put that in right there. Our fission fuel assembly on top of that, and our control rod assembly on top of that. Now if you end up building this taller, basically you just need fission fuel assemblies except for the very top one, and then you just do a control rod assembly. So you can stack these and still just have one control rod assembly on top. We'll get more into that as far as expanding it out and stuff later on. We do that and that. That way we can kind of look inside and have a full view there. And then we're going to put our fission reactor ports in right there. And we're going to configure this. And let's do shift right click, and we can change it here to output waste, output coolant, input only. We're going to set this one here is going to be input only. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put in a pressurized tube right there. And you can see we can open this up at the moment, and we can look inside, and you can see there's a coolant tank, fuel tank, heated coolant tank, and a waste tank. Lots of different tanks on this. So I think at first look it might be a little bit intimidating, but it's actually not too bad. Now this pressurized tube, we're going to go ahead, let's run this down under the ground a little bit, and this one is going to go over and connect to our fuel output. And before we fully connect that up, let's go ahead and figure out where everything else is going to be plugged up at. The next thing we're going to have is the stuff that connects over into our turbine. Let's see, let's actually pull this off and switch it with this side. This will be a little bit easier to run once our reactor gets bigger, because then we'll have a lot of like surface area and we can just kind of put these wherever. But for now, we're going to do that. Right over here, we're going to set this one to output coolant, and then we're going to leave this one as input. Let's actually reverse this though. Let's do output coolant on the top. And what output coolant means is whenever this thing runs, it doesn't produce power, it produces steam. It turns water into steam, or it turns sodium. It makes the superheated sodium. We'll probably get into that a little bit later, but for right now, I'm just going to go with water. The coolant that's going to be output is going to be steam, and that is going to need a pressurized tube. Now, the input that we're going to be running is going to need a fluid pipe, because it's going to be water that goes back into this. So we're just going to grab ourselves an ultimate mechanical pipe, and we're going to go ahead and set that up. We don't have to worry about this side because it's not going to be able to connect. So there we go. And then this side, this one here is going to be output waste. And so if we plug this up, let's go ahead and disconnect that. We're going to be outputting that waste, and that's going to run down. We're basically just going to have it run down under the ground here. So we're just going to go through, before we plug anything up, we're going to go through and just clip off all of our connections, because we don't want these two to connect. We want waste and our fuel to be separate. There we go. And we'll just run that out. And that's where the radioactive waste barrels are going to come into play. Okay, now at this point we can go ahead and plug up our pipes to start inputting fuel into this. So we'll do that. We take a look here, you can see the fuel tank is filled now with fissile fuel. Okay, so we have the fuel in place. Now what we're going to need to do is give it some water. And this sink's going to be very, very temporary. We're only going to use it for a second just to fill up the buffer, and then we'll pull it off. So over here where the input is, we're going to put this in, and we're going to say you can extract, and you can see it's starting to fill up with coolant, in this case water. There we go, and we're going to pull that off now. We only want to fill up the buffers, and that's it. Okay, now these other two tanks, this is for the heated coolant, which will be steam, and for the waste, which will be that nuclear waste, that byproduct. Now let's go ahead and grab this crate here. This is the one that's got kind of all this various different things in here. And we're just going to pop over, and I'm actually going to just switch this input with this input for the time being. Everything's filtered, so that'll be fine for us. And that's going to start pulling things out, and it's going to start making us, once this all comes together, it's going to start making us turbine casings. Because we're going to go ahead and set up our turbine, and then I think next episode we'll run all the redstone and kind of put all the finishing touches on it, then actually run it. I think that'd be the best route to take. Now, you can see the turbine casings, they do craft 2 at a time, but they take 2 heavy engineering blocks, which was a ton of steel for that, to be honest, because we're going to be making 80 of these. They also take a steel casing, ethereal slate, which is kind of whatever, my blood is fast enough to keep up with that, and make those like a stack at a time. Conductive CAD core, which is easy enough, and then just a whole bunch of steel. Now, while that's running, there's a few other things that we're going to need. First up, we are going to need a single rotational complex. We're going to need electromagnetic coils, and I need to grab the other 2 energy tablets since these things don't stack. There we go. 3 of these. We're going to be making the smallest size turbine as well. So just a heads up. We're going to need 6 saturating condensers. And then we are going to need 8 pressure dispersers. This is all for the turbine. And let me grab this crafting station for just a moment. That way I can plug it up against this crate here. We're also going to need 2 turbine blades, which I just went ahead and crafted these. These are super cheap. Also a turbine rotor, which I went ahead and crafted. And we're going to be using 8 structural glass. Now you can do more structural glass to make things a little bit cheaper, because this stuff is a lot cheaper than making the turbine casings, but I wanted to go with just 8 structural glass for this. That's my personal preference there. Let's see, how are we doing on the turbine casings? Let's grab these. And we're also going to want to get ourselves some turbine vents. and we're going to be making 8 of these. And while this takes some time to run, I'm going to go, I need to drain some of the water underneath this while those craft up. So give me just a little bit here. There's a couple other things that we're going to need, but we'll get into that in just a second. So, but let me get some of the water drained out of here, basically for next episode, because we're going to be running some redstone down here to kind of give ourselves some redstone control for this system here. Okay, so we got a bit of our turbine casings. Let's go ahead and grab those. And there is one other thing. Do I want to go ahead and, yeah, let's go ahead and get that real quick. Because I got our 8 vents, but let's go ahead and get a set of valves. These right here. I'm just going to get 2 of those. One's going to be for inputting steam, one's going to be for outputting power. Is what we're going to be using those for. And then let's go ahead, and this is going to go, by the way, that I keep climbing over, but let's go ahead and set up our turbine, and we're going to put this in right here. And this is going to be a 5x5 base. So we'll just place out that. And if we pop down here, you can see I did get this all drained. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our turbine rotor and we're going to put this in the very middle. We're going to take our turbine blades, we're going to put those right like that. And this is the extent of our turbines. And then above that, we're going to put on a rotational complex right there. And then above that, we're going to put on electromagnetic coils. Just however, as long as they're connected, that doesn't matter. Now, different ratios, like as we build this bigger, we'll need different ratios of electromagnetic coils. Like, for example, if we take a look at all of this stuff has kind of detailed information here. It says a block that converts kinetic energy from a rotational complex into usable electricity. These can be placed in any arrangement above your rotational complex as long as they're all touching each other and the complex itself. But as we build this bigger, we will want to add in more vents. We'll want to add in more saturating condensers, pressure dispersers. They're basically just going to cover the extent of the size of your reactor. We'll go ahead and put these on real quick. These are going to attach and just go around the pressure or around the rotational complex like so. And this is basically to evenly disperse steam throughout the multi-block is the purpose of those. And then up here by the electromagnetic coil, we're going to put in saturating condensers. And what these do is they'll allow us, like if we take a look here, they're going to be what allows us to change that steam back into water. You don't necessarily have to have these, but it'll allow us to make a closed system, which I do quite like a bit. And then we're going to just build this up like so. Build it up here. Kind of put the frame of this on. And then we're going to take our turbine valves. We're going to put one here, one here. Pretty straightforward. And let's go ahead. Let's grab our mechanism gas pipe. And we're going to run this out. Basically just straight across. Actually, you know what? Let's change this real quick. Let's do input and output coolant like that instead. It'll just line up better for us. So we'll do that. And this is going to come straight across to one of these turbine valves. And then let's grab our fluid one. And we're going to run this one out. And it's going to come up by 1 right there. And then we're going to put in our... Well, let's go ahead and put in these turbine casings like so. Our structural glass, we're going to put in right there just so we can kind of see our system running. Of course, we'll be looking at pressure dispersers, but that's okay. And then up here on top, we're going to go ahead and just put in the rest of these turbine casings. All in all, it's a 5x5x5. This is the minimum size that we can possibly build to make a usable turbine. Now, bear in mind that you could technically run this and get polonium without needing the turbine, but you'd not be producing any power. You'd pretty much just be having to void the steam. But that is an option. If you don't want to build the turbine, you can do that. It'll just make things, I guess, a little bit cheaper for you, but a little bit more wasteful for you as well. So it's kind of up to you, I suppose. You could get away without having to make all these turbine casings, which of course is the most expensive part of this. So, and then we're going to bring down turbine casings there, there. And once we make this thing bigger, once we have a bigger reactor, we'll be producing more steam, and then we can make this a bit bigger. So we'll change up our system a little bit, the way it looks and everything. And then we're going to take our turbine vents. These need to be up here with the saturating condensers, kind of on this layer, and these will vent the turbine. But what we're going to be using them for is actually plugging up one of our ultimate mechanical pipes to actually pull the water back out and send it back over to the fission reactor. So now what we can do is we can take and just shift right click. We're going to say pull that. We're going to say pull there. And then we're going to set up a, let's see, that's 20,000 FE per tick. That'll be fine for this turbine, though down the road we'll want to upgrade this, to be honest. Just to kind of keep with the mechanism theme, I did make some ultimate universal cable. I did also make this. This was for fuel. Was my original plan for it. You can see I made a stack of conductive CAD cores, but didn't actually need that many. They don't stack, which is awesome. It's great for that craft. Be a little bit easier once we get everything all automated and all. But and we're going to go ahead and just plug up our ultimate universal cable there. And we're going to say you can extract. And on here, we're going to say the top is only going to receive energy. We don't want it to actually extract energy from the top. And we can open this up and you can see this tank will get steam, power will go here. And you can see, if you click on here, you can see what's limiting this. So right now we don't have as many blades as we could support, but everything else looks good. And you can see your max production and your max water output, as well as your max flow rate. This is kind of important to compare it to this over here. So right now we can burn 1 millibucket per tick. The turbine's going to be fine for keeping up with this, but I do suggest if you are scaling up your turbines or scaling up your reactors especially, make sure and kind of just test it, maybe in a test world, because if your reactor gets too big and your turbine can't keep up with it, what happens is steam backs up, heat goes up, and boom, you don't want that. So, and now before we end out this episode, I wanted to spend just a second to kind of talk about mechanism radiation. So our nuclear waste is going to travel down into these radioactive waste barrels. These can be inserted into or extracted from either the top or bottom. They're not specific, but you cannot do anything with the side. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending that down into this radioactive waste barrel, and then it's going to pull out the bottom and get fed into these two. And then what we'll do is attach a couple cables here and just clip off that connection. And these are going to be used to extract, and then it's going to be sent to solar neutron activators from here. We're going to get into that next episode. But the way that we're laying this out, we're going to use this radioactive waste barrel as a redstone reading, because these do work with comparators. So just a heads up there. So if you want to read how much is stored in this, the way that you see how much is stored is just to shift right click on these. And you can see none of these have any gas at the moment because we haven't ran our fission reactor at the moment. But on radiation, Mekanism has now its own radiation system. There's a couple ways that you can accrue radiation. First up, radioactive waste barrels. For starters, they're the only way to store nuclear waste or spent nuclear waste. You cannot, as mentioned before, you cannot store that in a gas tank. You cannot store that or send it through quantum entangler-porters. You can store it in ultimate pressurized tubes, because bear in mind that these do store an actual ton of a given gas. So if we can actually get a reading here, I was going to say waiting for server. It seems to do that anytime that there's actually gas in it. If there's not any gas, it's like, yeah, there's nothing in there. But they can actually store quite a bit of gas. So technically you could store them in the ultimate pressurized tubes. And having a line of these does create for a kind of nice buffer. Now, one thing to note about the radioactive waste barrel, which we're actually going to be utilizing come next episode, is any nuclear waste or spent nuclear waste stored in them will slowly dissipate. Very, very slowly. Like 1 millibucket every, like, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. It's very, very slow. But when it comes to the spent nuclear waste, there's nothing else really to do with it unless you just ship it off somewhere really far from your base and let it get broken, and then just kind of go out into the world and create kind of a radiation zone. That is an option, but the safest way to deal with it is to have a bunch of radioactive waste barrels and just kind of have it dissipate. Now, the nuclear waste, we do actually want to use it. We're kind of just using this as storage, but we're not going to probably let it dissipate out of these waste barrels because it's going to be immediately shipped off to be used. That's just kind of more for like an extra buffer, plus to give us some kind of redstone control, redstone comparator reading off of that. I guess technically we could do without the radioactive waste barrels here as storage and just have the ultimate pressurized tubes as storage. Nah, I think I'd rather keep them though. It's just more storage and slow dissipation, but it's not actually going to be that important because this is all pretty well free for us. Now, if you break these, all the nuclear material that's stored inside will just get sent off into the world, and it takes a very, very, very long time to go away. It will passively go away, but it does take a very long time. Now, what you can do is you can craft yourself a hazmat suit. This allows you to enter areas or be around like nuclear fallout safely. Also, the mech suit does have an addition, like an add-on to that. So just a heads up there if you're making a mech suit. Also, if you want to move yellow cake uranium or any kind of like nuclear mechanism nuclear materials, you will want to wear a hazmat suit as well. Otherwise, you'll get radiation poisoning. So just kind of bear that in mind. It's nice to have. It's not something that we'll probably be using a whole lot because our system should be safe. One thing to bear in mind, though, I noticed in my test world, is it seems like carry-on, even though you're not breaking the waste barrel, you have to be kind of careful in this pack because shift right click is how you check how much gas is in there, but it's also carry-on. And if you carry on one of these barrels, it treats it as if you broke it. So if you do that, all the radiation will go into the world. It'll still have the nuclear waste inside, but you'll quickly start building up radiation poisoning. So just a heads up there. But at this point, we are able to now start up our reactor. We're gonna toggle it on just so you can see it, but we're going to be adding a bit more control to this come next episode. So if we activate this, it's going to start running. Its heat's going to start going up, and you can see that steam is being produced. But you'll notice that water levels, they're not really changing here. I mean, granted, they're slowly going down, but now they've kind of tapered off, and they're not going to be going down anymore because that steam is just getting sent back around. It's getting turned back into water and getting sent right back around to this fission reactor. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for now because I don't actually need it. But if we take a look down here, we will probably see that slight brownish look to this. For some reason, once again, I can't check these, but these do now have some nuclear waste in them. And of course, it's not going to dissipate while it's in the pressurized tube. It only dissipates when it's in the waste barrel. But as you saw, the temperature goes up. Now with this reactor, it's not a concern that the temperature is going to reach maximum. But what you have to watch out for is you don't want it to run out of water, or it can heat up and it can explode really, really fast. Like if it ever runs out of coolant, it will quickly skyrocket in temperature and start taking damage and then explode, which causes you to have radioactive fallout. It causes a big explosion and causes radioactive fallout for a very long amount of time. So you definitely don't want that. Also, if it fills up with steam, it's going to keep trying to burn. That steam can't go anywhere. The heat's going to go up. Also, if it fills up with nuclear waste, it's going to fill up. Now, with a closed system, we don't have to worry too much about the coolant. We should always have plenty of water in here because it's just getting cycled back around. But we're going to be reading basically the waste and also the power. because we don't want this to fill up with power and not be able to use the steam, causing this to run out of coolant or fill up with steam. We don't want that. So we're going to be basically just monitoring our power and monitoring our waste to make sure that we don't ever run out of those. The rest of this should be fine. The turbine, like I said, is going to keep up just fine with our production. So we're going to get into that come next episode. I actually wanted to take a moment to talk about, just kind of give a kind of a short and sweet talk about radiation and ways that you'll get it and ways to avoid getting it before we move into next episode, which will be adding the redstone control and processing down that nuclear waste first into making our polonium, and then getting rid of the spent nuclear waste that's going to be left over, because that can quickly become an issue if you aren't dealing with that as well. So anyways, with that, we're going to wrap up this episode here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already to stay updated with when new videos come out, and I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys then.